The gym was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the distant pulse of New York City beyond the windows. Nathan's heart pounded louder than the weights he'd been lifting, his breath catching as Julian's hand lingered on his arm, warm and steady, under the guise of correcting his form. In that fleeting moment, the world shrank to just the two of them, and Nathan knew he'd never see the gym or Julian the same way again. It was late, well past 10 p.m., and the gym in Brooklyn's Dumbo neighborhood was nearly deserted. Nathan, 25, had been coming here for months, trying to rebuild himself after a brutal breakup that left him questioning everything: his confidence, his worth, his place in the world. The gym was his sanctuary, a place to drown out the noise of his insecurities with the clank of iron and the burn of his muscles. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, Julian was here. Julian, 27, was the kind of guy who turned heads without trying. A personal trainer with a physique carved from discipline and a smile that could melt steel. He had an easy charisma that made every client feel like they were his only focus. Nathan had noticed him from day one, those warm brown eyes, the way his gray t-shirt hugged his broad shoulders, the quiet confidence in his voice when he offered tips. But Nathan had always kept his distance, burying his attraction under layers of self-doubt. He wasn't out. Not really. Growing up in a small Ohio town had taught him to keep that part of himself locked away, hidden behind a carefully curated mask of just another guy. "Keep your elbows in, Nathan," Julian said, his voice low and smooth, breaking through Nathan's thoughts. They were alone in the free weight section, the mirrors reflecting their silhouettes against the city skyline. Julian stepped closer, his hand guiding Nathan's arm through the motion of a dumbbell curl. The touch was professional, precise, but it sent a jolt through Nathan's body, like a spark igniting something he'd tried to ignore for years. "You're stronger than you think," Julian added, his eyes locking with Nathan's in the mirror. There was something in his gaze, something that felt less like a trainer's encouragement and more like an invitation. Nathan swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Thanks," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken tension. Nathan's mind raced. Was he imagining this? Was Julian just being friendly? Or was there something more? He'd spent so long suppressing his feelings, convincing himself that guys like Julian, confident, gorgeous, effortlessly charming, were out of reach. But here they were, inches apart, the air between them charged with possibility. Julian stepped back, breaking the spell, and grabbed a towel from a nearby rack. "You're doing great, man." Really, he flashed that disarming smile, and Nathan felt his cheeks flush. "Want to try one more set?" Nathan nodded, grateful for the distraction. But as they moved through the exercises, Julian's presence felt different, closer, more intentional. He corrected Nathan's posture with gentle touches, his fingers brushing against Nathan's back, his wrist, his shoulder. Each contact was brief but electric, leaving Nathan dizzy with questions he wasn't ready to answer. As the session ended, Julian lingered by the water fountain, wiping sweat from his brow. "You sticking around for a bit?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes searching. Nathan hesitated. He should go home, shower, crawl into bed, and forget the way his heart was racing. But something in Julian's voice, in the way he leaned just a little closer, made Nathan stay. "Yeah, Nathan said, surprising himself. I could use a stretch. Julian grinned, tossing the towel over his shoulder. Cool. Let's hit the mats. They moved to the stretching area, a quieter corner of the gym with soft mats and a view of the Brooklyn Bridge glittering in the distance. Nathan knelt to stretch, hyper-aware of Julian's presence beside him. The trainer mirrored his movements, their knees brushing as they leaned into a lunge. Nathan's pulse quickened, his mind a tangle of fear and longing. He wasn't ready for this, not for the feelings, not for the risk. But Julian's voice, soft and steady, cut through the noise. You ever feel like you're holding back? Julian asked, his eyes fixed on the mat. Like there's something you want, but you're too scared to go for it. Nathan froze. The question felt like a spotlight, exposing every secret he'd buried. He wanted to laugh it off, to change the subject, but Julian's gaze was unwavering, vulnerable in a way Nathan hadn't expected. Maybe, Nathan admitted, his voice barely audible. What about you? Julian's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. All the time, the words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Nathan's heart thudded, his mind screaming at him to pull back, to run. But he didn't. Instead, he held Julian's gaze, letting the moment stretch until it felt like the world might crack open. Let's grab a drink, Julian said suddenly, standing and offering Nathan a hand. There's a spot nearby. Nothing fancy, just us. Nathan stared at the outstretched hand, his chest tight. This was it, a choice. He could say no, go back to his safe, lonely routine. Or he could take a chance, step into the unknown, and see where it led. He took Julian's hand, the warmth of it grounding him, and stood. Yeah, he said, his voice steadier now. Let's do it. As they left the gym, the cool night air hitting their faces, Nathan felt something shift inside him, a spark of courage, a flicker of hope. He didn't know where this night would lead, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid to find out. Xi artifact ID equals 10 V4 7 artifact equals E4 F5 6 7 6 5 7 it title equals my gym trainer touched me to correct my form part 2.md content type equals text/markdown. The bar was a cozy dive tucked between a bodega and a vintage bookstore, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the night. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and whiskey, and low jazz hum from a jukebox in the corner. Nathan and Julian slid into a booth, their knees brushing under the table, and Nathan felt the same electric jolt he'd felt in the gym. You come here often? Nathan asked, tried to sound casual as he sipped his beer. His hands were clammy, his heart still racing from the walk over, where Julian's arm had grazed his as they navigated the crowded sidewalk. Julian leaned back, his eyes glinting under the bar's dim lights. Only when I need to unwind. Or when I'm with someone worth bringing here. He said it lightly, but the weight of his words landed square in Nathan's chest. Nathan laughed nervously, looking down at his drink. I'm not sure I'm that special. You are, Julian said, his voice low, serious. You just don't see it yet. The words hit Nathan like a punch, stirring something deep and unfamiliar. He'd spent so long hiding, convincing himself he didn't deserve to be seen, that hearing Julian say otherwise felt like a lifeline, but also terrified him. What if Julian was wrong? What if Nathan let himself hope, only to crash again? They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as the drinks. Julian shared stories of growing up in Miami, his Cuban heritage, and the moment he realized he was gay, a quiet revelation at 16, watching a sunset on South Beach with a boy who'd never know how much that moment meant. Nathan listened, captivated, but hesitated when Julian asked about his own past. "I don't have much to tell," Nathan said, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "Small town, strict parents. I kept to myself." Julian tilted his head, studying him. "But you're here now. That's something." Nathan's throat tightened. He wanted to tell Julian everything, the years of silence, the shame, the nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering who he was allowed to be. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess it is." As the night wore on, the bar grew quieter, the crowd thinning until it was just them and a bartender wiping down the counter. Julian's hand rested on the table, inches from Nathan's, and the space between them felt like a challenge. Nathan's pulse quickened. He wanted to close the gap, to feel Julian's skin against his again, but fear held him back. Then Julian's fingers brushed his, deliberate and slow. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Nathan nodded, his breath shallow. "I'm just not used to this." "To what?" Julian's thumb grazed Nathan's knuckles, sending a shiver up his spine. "To someone like you," Nathan admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "To feeling like this." Julian's smile was gentle, but his eyes burned with intensity. "You don't have to be used to it. You just have to let it happen." Nathan's heart pounded, torn between leaping forward and pulling back. He'd spent so long building walls, but Julian was dismantling them with every look, every touch. When Julian leaned closer, his breath warmed against Nathan's cheek, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Let me walk you home," Julian said, his voice a quiet promise. Nathan's apartment was only a few blocks away, a small studio and a walk-up with peeling paint and a creaky staircase. The walk was quiet, the city's hum fading into the background as they moved side by side, their shoulders brushing. At the door, Nathan fumbled with his keys, his nerves buzzing. "You gonna be okay?" Julian asked, leaning against the doorframe, his eyes searching Nathan's face. "I think so," Nathan said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for tonight." Julian stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on Nathan's arm. "Anytime." "Nathan." "I mean it." Before Nathan could overthink it, he leaned in, pressing his lips to Julian's in a fleeting, impulsive kiss. It was brief, barely a second, but it set his entire body alight. Julian's eyes widened, then softened, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Good night, Nathan," Julian said, his voice warm, teasing. He turned to leave, but not before brushing his fingers against Nathan's one last time. Nathan closed the door, his heart racing, his mind a whirlwind. He'd crossed a line tonight, one he'd never dared to approach before. And as he sank onto his couch, staring at the ceiling, he knew there was no going back. The next morning, Nathan woke with Julian's smile burned into his mind. He replayed the kiss, the warmth of Julian's hand, the way his own heart had betrayed him with its wild, reckless hope. But doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering that he'd misread everything, that Julian was just being kind. At the gym that evening, Nathan hesitated at the entrance, his stomach twisting. Would Julian act like nothing happened? Would he regret it? Nathan pushed through the doors, his gym bag heavy on his shoulder, and scanned the room. Julian was there, spotting a client at the bench press, his laughter echoing across the gym. Nathan's chest tightened. He wanted to turn back, but Julian's eyes found his, and a grin broke across his face. "Hey, you made it," Julian called, jogging over once his client finished. He was in a navy tank top today, his arms flexing as he wiped his hands on a towel. Ready to crush it, Nathan forced a smile, his nerves fraying. "Yeah, let's do it." They fell into their routine, but the air between them was different, charged, alive. Julian's touches were still professional, guiding Nathan through deadlifts and squats. But there was a new warmth in his voice, a playful edge to his teasing. "You're slacking, Nathan," he said, nudging Nathan's shoulder. "Gotta keep up with me." Nathan laughed, the tension easing. "You're a slave driver. You know that, only because I know you can handle it," Julian shot back, his eyes sparkling. After the session, Julian suggested they grab coffee at a nearby cafe, a quirky spot with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. Over steaming lattes, they talked about everything and nothing: movies, music, the way New York felt like a living, breathing thing. Nathan found himself opening up, sharing bits of his past he'd kept locked away, the suffocating expectations of his hometown, the way he'd always felt like he was playing a role. Julian listened, his eyes never leaving Nathan's. "That sounds lonely," he said softly. "But you're not there anymore. You get to decide who you are now." Nathan's throat tightened. "It's not that easy. I've spent so long hiding. I don't even know where to start." Julian reached across the table, his hand covering Nathan's. "You already started. Last night. That was you, Nathan. The real you." The words hit hard, cracking something open inside Nathan. He wanted to believe Julian, to trust that he could be more than the scared kid from Ohio. But fear was a stubborn thing, and it clung to him, whispering that this, whatever it was, couldn't last. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. Late-night gym sessions turned into walks through the city, stolen moments in quiet corners of parks and diners. Julian was patient, never pushing Nathan beyond what he was ready for, but his presence was a constant invitation to be brave. One night, as they sat on a bench overlooking the East River, Julian's arm draped casually around Nathan's shoulders. Nathan felt a flicker of something new: freedom. But freedom came with a cost. Nathan's family back in Ohio started asking questions: why he was staying out late, why he seemed different. His older brother, Mark, called one evening, his voice laced with suspicion. "You're not getting into trouble out there, are you?" Mark asked, his tone sharp. Nathan's grip tightened on his phone. "No, just living my life." Mark snorted. "Just don't do anything stupid, Nate. You know how Mom and Dad are." The call left Nathan shaken, his old fears resurfacing. He hadn't told his family he was gay, hadn't even hinted at it. The thought of their disapproval, their rejection, was a weight he couldn't shake. He pulled back from Julian, canceling plans, dodging texts. Julian noticed, his texts growing shorter, his voice quieter when they did talk. One night, Julian showed up at Nathan's apartment, his expression serious. "What's going on?" "Nathan," he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "You're shutting me out." Nathan's heart sank. I just need time." "Time for what?" Julian's voice was gentle but firm. "To decide if you're allowed to be happy." Nathan looked away, his eyes burning. "You don't get it. My family, they'd never understand." "I could lose them." Julian stepped closer, his hand resting on Nathan's cheek. "You don't have to lose me. But you have to choose." "Nathan, you can't keep running from who you are." The words hung in the air, a challenge and a plea. Nathan wanted to reach for Julian, to hold on to the warmth and safety he offered. But the fear was still there, a wall he didn't know how to climb. Nathan avoided the gym for days, his apartment becoming a cage of his own making. He ignored Julian's texts, each one a reminder of the choice he wasn't ready to face. But the silence was louder than anything, filled with the ache of missing Julian's laugh, his touch, his steady presence. One evening, unable to stand the quiet, Nathan wandered to a rooftop bar in Williamsburg, hoping the city's lights would drown out his thoughts. He was halfway through a beer when he saw Julian across the room, laughing with a group of friends. Nathan's heart lurched. Julian looked happy, effortless, like he belonged in a world Nathan could only dream of joining. Before he could slip away, Julian's eyes met his. The smile faded, replaced by something raw, unguarded. Julian excused himself from his friends and crossed the room, his expression a mix of relief and frustration. "You're a hard guy to find," Julian said, sliding onto the stool next to Nathan. Nathan stared at his drink, his throat tight. "I didn't think you'd want to see me." Julian's brow furrowed. "Why the hell not?" "Nathan, I'm not the one pulling away." The words stung, but they were true. Nathan took a shaky breath. "I'm scared. Okay, I don't know how to do this, how to be this person you think I am." Julian's hand found his under the bar, hidden from view. "I don't think you're anyone. I see you. Nathan. The guy who's funny and kind and stronger than he realizes. I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm just asking you to show up." Nathan's eyes burned, his chest tight with emotion. He wanted to believe Julian, to trust that he could be enough. But the weight of his family, his past, felt like chains he couldn't break. They left the bar together, walking through the city's quiet streets. Julian didn't push, didn't demand answers, but his presence was a steady anchor. At a small park, they sat on a bench, the skyline glittering across the river. Nathan took a deep breath, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "My dad, he'd disown me if he knew," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "My mom would cry for weeks. They're not bad people. They don't get it. And I don't know if I can lose them." Julian listened, his hand still holding Nathan's. "I get it," he said quietly. "My family wasn't thrilled when I came out. It took time, a lot of fights. But I couldn't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. And neither can you. Nathan. Not forever." Nathan's heart ached, torn between love and fear. He leaned into Julian, their shoulders pressed together, and for a moment, the world felt bearable. The next week was a blur of small steps forward. Nathan started showing up at the gym again, and Julian was there, patient but persistent. They shared more moments, quiet dinners, late-night walks, stolen kisses, and empty stairwells. Each one chipped away at Nathan's fear, replacing it with a fragile hope. But the past wasn't done with him. One afternoon, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from his brother. Mark, coming to NYC for work. Staying with you. See you next week. Panic gripped Nathan. Mark was the golden child, the one who followed their parents' rules, who never questioned the way things were. If he saw Nathan with Julian, if he even suspected, everything could unravel. Nathan didn't tell Julian about the visit. He couldn't. Instead, he pulled back again, his text shorter, his excuses flimsier. Julian noticed, his patience wearing thin. One night at the gym, he cornered Nathan by the lockers. You're doing it again, Julian said, his voice low. Hurt. What's wrong? Nathan, talk to me. Nathan's hands shook. My brother's coming. He can't know about us. About me. Julian's face fell, but he nodded. Okay. I get it. But you can't keep hiding forever. You deserve better than that. Nathan wanted to argue, to say he could handle it, but the words wouldn't come. Julian walked away, leaving Nathan alone with the weight of his choices. Mark's visit was a storm waiting to break. Nathan's apartment, once a haven, felt like a minefield as he tidied away anything that might hint at his truth. Photos with Julian, a pride flag magnet he'd bought on a whim. Mark arrived late, his suitcase thudding against the floor, his handshake firm and his smile guarded. Good to see you, Nate, Mark said, scanning the apartment. You're doing okay out here? Yeah, Nathan lit, his stomach churning. Just keeping busy. Mark stayed for 3 days, filling the space with stories of home, of their parents' expectations, of the life Nathan had left behind. Every word was a reminder of the world he'd fled, the one that still claimed him. Nathan avoided the gym, avoided Julian, his phone silent except for Mark's constant questions. On the last night, Mark suggested they grab dinner at a sports bar nearby. Nathan agreed, hoping the noise would drown out his anxiety. But as they walked back, Mark's tone shifted. You've been weird, Nate, he said, his eyes narrowing. Distracted. What's going on? Nathan's heart raced. Nothing. Just work? The gym. You know. Mark stopped walking, his expression hard. You're hiding something. I know you. What is it? The question was a blade, cutting through Nathan's defenses. He wanted to tell the truth, to finally be free, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he shook his head. You're imagining things. Mark didn't push, but the suspicion lingered, a shadow Nathan couldn't escape. When Mark left the next morning, Nathan felt no relief, only a deeper sense of isolation. He went to the gym that night, desperate for something familiar. Julian was there, training a new client, but his eyes found Nathan's across the room. When the session ended, he walked over, his expression guarded. You're back, Julian said, his voice neutral. Nathan nodded, his throat tight. I'm sorry. My brother was a lot. Julian's face softened, but there was a distance in his eyes. I get it, Nathan. But I can't keep doing this, waiting for you to decide if I'm worth the risk. The words cut deeper than Nathan expected. He reached for Julian's hand, but Julian stepped back. I care about you, Julian said, his voice breaking. But I need you to meet me halfway. Nathan watched him walk away, his chest aching. He'd pushed Julian too far, and now he was losing the one person who'd made him feel alive. That night, alone in his apartment, Nathan stared at his phone. Julian's last text glowing on the screen. I'm here when you're ready. The next day, Nathan made a choice. He called his mom, his hands trembling as he told her the truth. The conversation was brutal. Her tears, her questions, her quiet disappointment. But when it was over, Nathan felt lighter, like he'd shed a weight he'd carried for years. He texted Julian, "Can we talk? I'm ready." They met at the park by the East River, the same place they'd shared so many quiet moments. Julian looked wary, but his eyes softened when Nathan spoke. "I told my mom," Nathan said, his voice steady. "It was hard, but I'm done hiding. I want this. I want us." Julian's smile was slow, radiant. He stepped closer, his hand finding Nathan's. "Took you long enough." They kissed, slow and deliberate, the world falling away. For the first time, Nathan felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of new beginnings. Nathan and Julian fell into a rhythm: gym sessions, late-night talks, mornings tangled in each other's arms. Nathan was still navigating the fallout with his family. His mom called occasionally, her voice cautious but trying, while his dad remained silent. It hurt, but Julian was there, a steady presence through every storm. One evening, they attended a pride event in Manhattan, the streets alive with color and music. Nathan hesitated at first, the crowd overwhelming, but Julian's hand in his grounded him. They danced under rainbow lights, laughed with strangers, and for the first time, Nathan felt like he belonged, not just to Julian, but to himself. "You're different now," Julian said later, as they sat on a rooftop overlooking the city. "Lighter. Like you're finally you." Nathan smiled, his heart full. "I'm getting there. Because of you." Julian shook his head. "Not me. You did this, Nathan. You chose to show up." The words stayed with Nathan, a reminder of the courage he'd found, the life he was building. He still had battles to face: his family, his doubts, the world's judgment, but he wasn't alone anymore. One night, back at the gym where it all began, Nathan and Julian stayed late, the space quiet except for their laughter. Julian guided Nathan through a new lift, his hands steady on Nathan's shoulders, his voice warm with pride. "You've come a long way," Julian said, his eyes shining. Nathan grinned, pulling Julian close. "Only because you touched me to correct my form." Julian laughed, his lips brushing Nathan's in a kiss that felt like a promise. "Best correction I ever made." As they left the gym, hand in hand, the city sprawling before them, Nathan knew he'd never forget that night, the night he let himself feel, let himself love, let himself live. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was his, and that was enough.